We
Hi, everyone. We're going to get ready, started in about 4 minutes, so please take your seat. Oh my God. This is the one I thought.
Astronaut socks. There they are. Actually made out of astronauts.
Oh my God.
It's a song about that, I think. See?
Okay, folks, good evening. We're going to get started NASA night. On behalf of both LPI and NASA, welcome. I suspect we're going to have an interesting session tonight. I will turn it to my co-chair, Justin Filiberto, to make the introduction.
Thanks, Walter. Without further ado, our speaker is Charles Webb, who is the acting NASA Planetary Science Division Director.
All right, thanks, Justin and Walter. I want to say welcome to the 56th Lunar Planetary Science Conference. I had the real privilege on Friday of going to Johnson and touring the Apollo lab where the curation facility where the original rocks that were returned from the moon are. Thanks to Eileen Stansberry and Justin and Gemma and Ryan, who gave me a really amazing tour and a reminder of the origins of this conference. And so I'm really pleased to be here tonight to share with you sort of our update, to talk some about the challenges that we're in. We know it's a very dynamic, challenging environment. I'm going to talk for quite a while. I'm going to try and keep it limited, but I will talk over what I'm supposed to. And then we have Jake Bleacher as well, who's going to give an update from ESDMD, and we have Brad Bailey here as well, who's going to talk from the SEO perspective. So we are going to leave time for plenty of time for Q&A. So we'll do our best to accommodate the questions as long as we can, recognizing that we do need to eat dinner. So I do want to thank LPI and JSC for their organization of this conference for a while, but specifically for this one. We really value the partnership that we've developed and appreciate all the work that your folks and your teams have done. All right, so we can move on to the next slide. It's a little bit of a feedback. Okay, so perhaps for the last time, I'd like to pay tribute to my predecessors. Lori Glaze, many of you know, led this division for 6.5 years. She got the call to the big leagues, and she was named first the acting Deputy Associate Administrator for ESDMD, which is the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. And then she was hired permanently there, just as I was planning to come on board as the deputy director. And then they made me the acting director because Lori was going to take this position permanently. Since then, she has actually been named the acting associate administrator for ESDMD. So she's jumped up as well as I have. And we've texted about our rapid ascents in our respective careers in the last few months. It's been a challenge. But we're very happy for Lori. We're happy to have a partner there in terms of our relationship of science to exploration. We think that's a really beneficial thing for all of NASA. Gina DiBraccio, many of you know, also stepped in last year coming from Goddard Space Flight Center to take the acting director position for 6 months. And she did a really great job of keeping the division on track while Lori was doing her detail. And then Lori was picked up permanently, as I said. And so Gina has returned to her permanent position, which is the Deputy Director of Heliophysics at the Goddard Space Flight Center. Many of you may not know, Eric Ianson retired at the end of last year. So not only was he our Deputy Division Director, but he was also our Mars Exploration Program Director. And he stepped down at the end of last year. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of what the follow-on with respect to his responsibilities are. So we want to thank all of them, congratulate all of them both on taking new positions and retiring, and we wish them well going forward. So this is your current team. As mentioned, I'm currently the acting director. Kurt Niebuhr has graciously stepped up to be the acting deputy director. He took over in January when Eric said retirement was official. He retains his titles for both the lead scientist for flight programs and the lead scientist for New Frontiers. So he's still your person to go to when you have questions about those things. Shannon Fitzpatrick, since the last LPSC, has taken the Associate Director for Flight Programs position. So that's a permanent assignment. So she's getting through her first year in that position. Kathleen Vanderkaden is our current Director of Research Programs. Tiffany Morgan, and this is part of what I meant about Eric. So Tiffany Morgan, who was the deputy for MEP, is now the director of the MEP. And so that is a 1-year detailed position, but she's has full authority in that. And we're working very hard for everybody to mentally separate the roles of the MEP director from those of the deputy division director, because Eric had both of them before. And so these are separate positions now. So if you have more MEP questions, you should go to Tiffany. All right, and Lindsay Hayes, who's also on stage, is our senior scientist for Mars exploration. So she covers everything about Mars. Kelly Fast is our acting planetary defense officer. Lindley Johnson is on a phased retirement, and Kelly has stepped in to lead that. David Grinspoon remains our senior scientist for astrobiology strategy, and Becky McCauley-Wrench has joined him as the program scientist for astrobiology. And Delia Santiago Matarres is now our discovery program scientist. So this is your team. This is the leadership team. But I do want to take a minute and also ask anybody in the room who works for NASA headquarters to stand up for just a moment. So I want to thank all of these folks for everything that they've done, not just over the last 6 challenging weeks, but for the past year, and everything that they do. And I want you to know that these are your people. These are the folks that you should talk to all the time, that you should reach out to them. They haven't changed. The faces change. I mean, the positions change a little bit, but this team of people has been in place for quite a while, and they will continue to be. And so please reach out to them. Even though there's, some changes on this chart, the folks that you regularly interact with continue to be there for you every day. They're very dedicated, both civil servants and contractors, to the mission of planetary science. So I do want to mention here, I know many of you are probably wondering sort of who I am, because I haven't really talked to this particular group before, and how I ended up in this position. So a little introduction for myself. I have been at NASA headquarters since 2010. I've had a number of roles, first in Earth science, where I worked in the cryospheric sciences program, studying ice sheets and glaciers on the Earth. And I moved over to flight projects as the PE for the operating missions for Earth science. So I made the transition from an RNA position to a flight projects position. And then I succeeded Eric Jansen there as the associate director for flight programs. And so that's overseeing the entire flight portfolio for Earth science. And then 3 years ago, I moved to an organization called the Joint Agency Satellite Division as their deputy director. And that's the organization that oversees NASA's work on behalf of NOAA's terrestrial and space weather satellite systems. And El Sayed Talat is here, who is now the head of USRA and used to be head of the Space Weather Office at NOAA. So I had been working with him for a while, and I'm happy to see him in his new role. In 2023, though, I did start a 10-month detail in planetary science. So Eric Jansen had me come over as the associate director for flight. Joan Salute, the prior flight director, had retired. And so we were in the process of selecting a permanent one, and they wanted somebody to come in the meantime. So I did get a lot of exposure to this community. I got a lot of interesting flight experience. I got to experience the OSIRIS-REx sample return, the Psyche launch, and maybe less exciting, but no less important, got to see Dragonfly through its confirmation review and confirm to Congress the parameters of that mission. I did also get to attend this LPSC last year. I was supporting Lori, and she texted me this morning wishing me luck tonight. She knows very much what this night means, and so she was very happy and confident that I could do this, so I'm trying my best. I do want to say that, although my professional opportunities did take me to Earth science, I, like many kids who were in this room, or who are in this room, I really grew up fascinated by astronomy. I had a telescope. I made little index cards of Messier galaxies. I did a science project on the potential planets around Barnard's star that took me to the Texas State Science Fair. But perhaps most importantly, I read and reread Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and I fell in love with our solar system. My mother took me to see Carl speak at Trinity University in San Antonio, which is where I grew up when I was in high school, and I decided to go to Cornell University. I also realized that I probably wasn't going to make a very good astronomer, so I decided to become a mechanical engineer, which pays better, I think. But in my freshman year, I did sign up for Astronomy 102, which is called Our Solar System. And I sincerely hoped that Carl Sagan would teach it because he had done that in the past. And I was profoundly disappointed that there was a new guy teaching it. And his name was Steve Squires. It was probably his first year teaching at Cornell, when he went back after he was at Ames for a while. It was really a great class, and that was even before Steve was Steve. So, it all worked out just fine, and I'm sure he remembers it just as well as I do. And I tell you this in part to assure you that my heart is in the right place when it comes to planetary science. It's always been a really great source of inspiration to me, and I have approached it since I've been in this position and when I was here last time, and will continue to approach it with the humility of somebody who's still continuing to learn. And I'm always eager to engage scientists in conversations about your work. So some random facts about me. This was suggested that I share a few things. I came back to graduate school after working for GE Aerospace, which was in New Jersey. And while I was in New Jersey, I worked on Mars Observer. So for those of you who know that long ago, that was a very difficult mission that ended in failure. But it was one of the formative experiences that I had early on in my career. My PhD is in aerospace engineering. I focus specifically on orbital mechanics. My dissertation is on precision orbit determination. I also met my future husband at UT Austin when I was there. As I was finishing up my PhD, he had just come in as a new assistant professor in the business school. We moved to DC about 15 years ago. As I said, when I started at NASA headquarters, I was finishing up a postdoc and he decided to leave academia. We live in Logan Circle, which is just a couple miles from headquarters, so I'm never far from work. I did want to mention also, I did do a StoryCorps interview for AGU last year, or a few years ago now. And one of the questions was, what is your favorite place to science? And I love that question. And I wasn't really doing science at the time. I was in the Joint Agency Satellite Division. And I said conferences. That's my place to do science. And it's really because I get to come here and talk to all of you about what you do. And that's, as I said, it's really inspiring to me. It's really important to hear you firsthand talk about the work that you do. I know you all like to do it because you all respond enthusiastically when I ask. And I'm really happy that you do, because that tells me just how passionate each and every one of you is about the science that you do. So with that, I'm going to say, now that you've invested some time in getting to know me, I do want to give you an update on where we are with the long-term strategy for PSD leadership. As many of you know, Nikki Fox sent out an email in early January that Louise Proctor would be joining PSD as the director in April for a one-year term, with the goal of holding a full and open competition in that year. You may not know that offer, along with many others in the federal government, had to be rescinded. And that was part of the government-wide hiring freeze that was initiated with the new administration. However, Nikki and I have continued to work with the agency leadership, and we are really trying hard to bring Louise on board. Remarkably, she's still very interested in coming, and I'm grateful for that. And we're trying to do that as soon as possible. But we don't have all the approvals. We don't have the timeline yet, but the agency is working very hard with us to make that happen. So if and when that does happen, which I hope it does, I will revert to my permanent position as the deputy director. And so I hope you feel like you won't have wasted your time getting to know me a little bit. So with that, I'm going to move on. All right, so this, regardless of the times that we're in and the challenges that we face, this is a remarkable graphic of the work that we do, that we span the entire solar system. It's the only nation to do so. And so there are a lot of really great highlights on this chart, and I don't have time to go into all of them tonight. And so I'm going to spend time on a few of the more recent highlights, but everybody should be very proud of the remarkable constellation of satellites that we have studying our solar system. So take that in and keep that in mind as we go forward. This year also started, as many of us know, with a very difficult situation before the new administration came in, even that in the challenges that we have in implementing a lot of the direction that we're getting was the JPL fires. We think of them as the JPL fires. It was really the fires in Southern California. It affected a great many of our colleagues at JPL. Several hundred were displaced from their homes, either temporarily or permanently. So our hearts and thoughts have been with them for a long time, and continue to be so. Mercifully, the lab itself was not harmed. There was some damage due to winds, but not from fire. And with remarkable determination, I was so deeply impressed by the teams that are responsible for operating our assets at Mars, who were so dedicated to continued to do the work when they had to move the mission operations out of JPL, and they continued to, do their jobs to keep our assets safe, which was remarkable given some of the things that were going on. Those fires also impacted a number of our vendors in the Southern California area, private companies, that actually contribute to our missions elsewhere. So it's not just the folks at JPL, it's the folks at other aerospace companies in Southern California that also contribute to our other missions, which have had impacts as a result. Okay, so highlights for this year. Obviously, a really big one, it seems like a long time ago now, but it's still since the last LPSC, is the Europa Clipper launch, which was an enormous, truly heavy lift to get off the ground in terms of the challenges that were faced toward the end, but as we were getting ready for the launch regarding the MOSFETs. And so the team there did really an outstanding job of pulling together the risk assessment of what risk we were going to have by the time we got to Jupiter. So I really commend that team for everything they did to get us off the ground. It was a spectacular launch on a Falcon Heavy. Everything since then has been going very well. All the deployments have gone well. The checkouts have gone well. We also did just recently the gravity assist at Mars. And so the spacecraft passed about 550 miles above the surface of Mars. It was the first test of the entire radar system, as well as calibration of the thermal imager. And both of those experiments went well. We're still waiting to download all of the data because they're in a low data rate mode. So we're really looking forward to taking a look at that. The next event there is going to be the flyby of Earth in 2026, and that will then send it on its way back to the Jupiter system. Absolutely. Okay, and this was another huge event. Just in January, there was a press conference to highlight two papers that were released that really represented the first in-depth analyses of minerals and molecules in the samples that were collected. When I was at JSC, I got to see the tool that was used to actually finally open the sample head, which was great because I was in planetary science when we had that and had to deal with all of the questions about when is it going to happen. So it was remarkable to see the ingenuity that goes into that. But these papers all revealed really remarkable things in the sense that that the samples contain the building blocks for life as we know it, and the minerals that form as evaporates from the briny water. And I think that's really one of the really big highlights there. The folks who wrote those papers are in this room. They had sessions earlier today. I really highly recommend you talk to them about all of those details. I do want to call attention to the fact that the sample catalog is now available. The first round of requests have been reviewed and selected recipients have been notified. We're anticipating 2 additional calls for in 2025, but the dates of those are TBD at the moment. And folks should also register or sign up for the Astro Materials newsletter for updates and other announcements, and the link is here. Moving on to astrobiology. So we have the DARES, which is essentially the request for information, and these are short white papers that will inform the implementation strategy for astrobiology. This builds on the decadal survey recommendations around astrobiology. I want to call attention in the upper right to the first ideation. Where is that? The Ideation Factory, I forgot that's what it's called, Ideation Factory, which was held last year, which was a great success. They're focused on essentially on the second one, which is going to be focused on ocean worlds. This is a really great early career opportunity. It's really to learn how a mission goes from concept to operations, and then to have them more involved in mission teams as they evolve in their career. So these missions take a long time. It's really great for early career people to get in at the ground level, and you can work your way through an entire life cycle of a mission. The astrobiology team also continues to engage with NASA mission teams, and that's to develop and hone best practices as far as communicating astrobiology relevant discoveries. And they've also, as part of that, they've set up what's called the Astrobiology Federation. And this builds on a model that was used for our technology programs across SMD called the TechFed, the Technology Federation. And so the group representing them, they take people from different divisions, astrophysics and heliophysics, for example, in order to sort of talk about astrobiology and work together as a group. Astrobiology research that's going to appear in Rose's 2025 as exobiology, P-STAR, and exoplanet research. So keep an eye out for that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And also in the bottom right, you have Our Alien Earth. So this is a new documentary that's on NASA Plus. It follows NASA scientists in the field as they explore the most extreme environments. So it's probably pretty entertaining. And also here you can join the NASA Astrobiology mailing list with the QR code that's shown here. All right, moving on to Mars. I want to call attention first to the Plenary town hall that's going to be on Wednesday. So that's where you can go to get a lot of dedicated information about Mars. And the reason we have a dedicated one is really because the MEP, the Mars Exploration Program, came out with its future plans, as well as MSR, the Mars Sample Return Mission. The last administrator announced the path forward there. So both of those are going to be talked about at that plenary session on Wednesday. So as I mentioned, the Mars Exploration Program Future Plan, that was debuted at AGU. And Eric Iansen was around for that. And so there's a QR code for here. It's available online. I also want to call out Perseverance, which collected its 26th sample and continues on. It's exploring outside the Jezero crater. And then also, as far as other missions in development, we have Rosalind Franklin. So that's an ESA mission, and NASA is making contributions to that. And those contributions really involve the launch vehicle, involves radioisotope heater units, engines for the descent module, navigation support, as well as the MOMA instrument. And so those have continued to move forward. That's a package that we call ROSA at headquarters. And so that has actually moved through its KDPA and KDPB, the key decision points that get it to approaching confirmation. And that's coming up for its confirmation review in May. Okay. Oh, I should have pointed out the photo at the bottom, which was taken by Odyssey. It's Olympus Mons. It says, oh yeah, Mars Odyssey. It's got cut off. Okay. So anyway, that's a very, very cool picture of Olympus Mons. Oops. Go forward. All right. So in terms of other parts of the portfolio, so these are missions that are in formulation and implementation. So NEAR Surveyor, importantly, just recently passed its critical design review. This is where you finalize the design. And that was completed in February. So they're also going through the, SMD is assessing the post-CDR outcomes. And so that's taking place actually this week. And their launch readiness date remains September of 2027. So this is what's looking for asteroids that may impact the Earth. So the NEO is the near Earth object. So it's searching for those, and it's going to map them in a methodical way that we've not been able to do before. Obviously, Dragonfly, I've talked about this in other forums, one of the most exciting missions that NASA has ever undertaken, one of the most complicated. And so its mission CDR is actually underway. And so, I'm sorry, their lander CDR was recently completed. They're getting ready for their mission CDR in April. And then they will also move forward to a confirmation review of the post-CDR outcomes. Importantly, SpaceX, the Falcon Heavy launch vehicle was selected. That's a huge step forward for them. And their launch date also remains July of 2028. For the Venus Triad, Da Vinci, Veritas, and Envision. Envision is the ESA mission that we're contributing Veritas, the radar instrument to. These are all going to be launching towards in the 2031-2032 timeframe. Those missions are still in formulation. All right, budget. So this chart might look familiar to most of you because it is literally the same chart that we had last year. And the reason for that, which means it's the president's budget from fiscal year 25. So the chart is exactly the same. So the reason for that is because many of you know we don't have action from the Congress on an FY25 budget, and it's March. And so you will have seen that there's currently a draft bill in the House of Representatives that essentially would extend the continuing resolution, which keeps us funded as a government at last year's spending levels, is currently pending in the House. So they want to continue that for the rest of the fiscal year. You normally see these as short-term things, like when the fiscal year starts and the Congress hasn't passed a budget, you'll see like, oh, it's a 2-month CR or a 3-month CR. And we've done that to this point. It expires actually on Friday, which is great for this conference, just in case we do shut down. Everybody gets to go home, but we get to have Ben here the whole week. And so that's One positive. And they have until midnight on Friday to either pass an appropriations bill or a new continuing resolution. As I said, the current draft one is to extend it through the end of the fiscal year. We don't know the details of what that will mean in terms of how it trickles down to NASA, as well as inside of NASA to SMD and to the planetary science budget. In shorter term CRs, everybody just assumes they get what they got last year. But we don't know that that's going to be the case here. So one of the things I want to call attention to, though, on this slide is you'll see beginning in 2026 that the Mars sample return budget is zero, because that's what it was in the FY25 budget. Given the direction that the last administrator gave in terms of marching forward with this dual path toward the preliminary design review for Mars sample return, that's going to be an area where we have to figure out what we're going to do in 2026 and what the implications will be for the rest of the budget, or whether the top line budget will accommodate that. So stay tuned for that. We don't have any information right now. In addition to the FY25 appropriation not being there, the FY26 president's budget has not come out yet. So in a transition year, it gets complicated because we submitted our inputs for the fiscal year 26 president's budget last fall. With the change in administration, we're waiting to hear back from the new people at the Office of Management and Budget on what their priorities are and how that impacts what we do in the FY26 president's budget. So we're still waiting on that part of the process. In addition, we've just started the FY27 president's budget process. And so it makes it very complicated to build a budget from 27 outward when you don't know what's happening in 25 and 26, but we'll proceed as we have to. Okay, as far as community updates, I know this is a huge topic. There's not a lot of information that I can provide. I will do my best to convey to you. Many of you know some of the executive orders that have come out. I really do want to make very clear, because NASA is part of the executive branch of our federal government, executive orders are not optional. They are direct orders from the president through OPM to the head of our agency. The head of our agency is currently in an acting position, appointed by the administration, is a career civil servant who is in a political position. So there's not a lot of wiggle room for her to independently assert her own priorities. So right now, because we do not have a confirmed administrator who is a political administrator in position, we don't have completely clear direction on what the goal is for NASA. So we're all trying to work through this process. We are ensuring that we are compliant with executive orders as well as court orders regarding the litigation that is taking place around those executive orders. We are trying to keep up with all of those. Those have come in at an incredibly fast rate. It's been very challenging for us collectively to keep up with ensuring compliance as we must with those executive orders. And so I really do ask for continued patience and grace with respect to our ability to communicate to you what's happening. I really do want to also thank you all for those of you who've reached out to us to see how we're doing. Those check-ins with us as well as with our program officers and program executives is really meaningful. Understanding you read the same things we do in the press, and then we also experience it at work in terms of racing to comply and figuring out what the intent is and figuring out how to do that. So that process alone is just taking up a lot of our time, and it is it's very draining in terms of it's the kind of work we don't do every day. So, being asked to review 6,000 grants is something we don't do all the time. So, Kathleen and her team have done an amazing job of keeping, planetary science on track, but it is a non-trivial task. So again, I really just want to preface our conversation during Q&A with, thank you for your grace and patience, and please keep that going. All right, so let's talk specifically about planetary science. So we have, the question has come out a lot about the New Frontiers AO, and this has been an ongoing evolutionary process. At AGU, I talked about the fact that we didn't have the CAPS report about the mission themes. We now have that. That is publicly available. Kurt is planning to release a community announcement by the end of this month There's a session also, as you'll see on Tuesday, to talk about that, as well as a session to talk about the readiness of mission PIs. So please try to attend both of those if you're interested in the New Frontiers AO. And do check out the CAPS list for the mission themes. This is not the final list necessarily. This is the National Academy's recommendation to us about what that should be. And I will reiterate, as I did at AGU, that Discovery and Simplex we cannot release in the same time frame as New Frontiers, and so these will we're likely not to release AOs for those before 2028. Okay, RNA updates. There is an RNA town hall tomorrow that Kathleen's going to lead. So if you have specific questions that you want to address with regard to RNA, please go to that and ask Kathleen. All right, and so some highlights. Roses 2025. We know that it appeared and then it disappeared, and that really it had to go through again a whole new process at headquarters, and so part of that is really due to the establishing a process by which we ensure that Roses 2025 has been reviewed and certified to meet compliance with the executive orders. So that's really the delay is making sure that we have the right people to say that they have reviewed it and that it is compliant. So please be patient. We do hope that's going to come out soon. There are some new things in it. So the no due date, the NOD programs they do continue. They're going to expand. One more program is going to have it. It's the Planetary Protection Research. Thank you. And also DAPPER, the dual anonymous peer review is now the default system or the default style across Roses. And I do want to draw attention to the fact that the solar system workings, emerging worlds, and solar system observations have now been combined into S-cubed. So that's a merger of those. So you'll see that when Roses 2025 comes out. Please stay up to date by signing up on NSPIRE for informational announcements. And I do want to emphasize, because I know we've had feedback and understandable feedback that NSSC changes its guidance, and sometimes PIs are unaware of that. And it's imperative that you work with your AORs at your institutions to keep up with that, because NSSC only communicates it to them. So they are responsible for informing you. And if they don't, then you need to be proactive in reaching out to them. And I say that because NSSC doesn't always communicate the changes that they make to us. So you reach out to our program officer and they may not be aware of the change that NSSC has been made, but NSSC has talked to your AOR. So I'm not taking ownership of that process, but I do really, the workaround is for you to be proactive with your own AORs at your institutions. Okay, and before I hand over to Jake, I'm going to just highlight a couple of Lunar things. There's also, as far as strategy documents go, there is now a new implementation plan for integrated lunar science strategy in the Artemis era. That's online at this URL, which you can't see because it's obscured by the QR code, so use that. And Survey is also going to do its cooperative agreement announcement 5. The draft of that is going to be expected in Q2 of 2025. That's delayed from the schedule we mentioned at AGU, largely because OMB changed their templates for notice of funding opportunities. So we had to work through making sure that our release of that is going to be compliant with that. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake, who I'm hoping is online.
Okay, can you hear me?
So that's
Is it coming through? Can you hear me?
what's happening.
Can anyone hear me?
I'm afraid to say yes because it's going to echo. Jake, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and get started. Appreciate the opportunity to. We having trouble? Go ahead. The opportunities. We having trouble? Okay, I'm going to give it a shot. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with everyone today. I want to thank SMD for giving me a few moments to speak, and want to thank the LPI staff for making it possible to connect today. And I want to apologize to everyone that I'm unable to participate in person. I really would like to have been there, but what can I say? It's beyond me. So I'll talk to you remotely. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, can you all hear me now? Am I a little more aligned with my video? Okay, we're gonna give this a shot. If it's not working, please go ahead and text me and I'll pause again. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody here today. I'll just briefly touch on a few things going on in our Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. This was already mentioned. We have recently moved Lori Glaze up to our acting AA position. So it's wonderful to have scientists with us. All right, I'm going to drop and try to call back in.
Started, we are continuing those. They are a wealth of information for us to help us make decisions on paths forward and what we're actually trying to accomplish on the surface. How do we use the architecture? We're continuing those. They are a wealth of information for us to help us make decisions on paths forward. those are open to the entire community, including the international partners. We are also standing up Mars surface science workshops as ESDMD is engaging in design decisions for Mars architecture. We want to make sure that science is front and center in those decision-making processes. And so we're starting up the surface science workshops to help us inform those decisions. And then, of course, we have a number of community-led studies that we approach the academies. We have science definition teams focused around South Pole Lake and Sample Basin sample return and exploration, or the SPARKS SDT, which will help us define South Pole Lake and Basin sample return from a science perspective, and then also science with humans on Mars and non-polar lunar science studies going through the academies. Some wonderful news. We have announced, and you're hearing this fresh today, the Artemis 3 and 4 deputy project scientists. And you'll see Dr. Patty Boyd will be our Artemis 3 deputy project scientist, and Dr. Jennifer Heldman will be our Artemis 4 deputy project scientist. So let's give them a round of applause, please. I know that Noah Petro and Barbara Cohen are really looking forward to having them engaged as soon as possible. So many of you are aware of what's been going on with Viper. We canceled the Viper project last year, largely due to budgetary constraints and some developmental concerns and budget risk overall. But we still have a desire to get the data coming back from Viper. And so what NASA had done is we released an RFI to the broader commercial community to see if there was a partner out there that could take Viper to the lunar surface and conduct Viper in as it was intended and get basically the science that we were trying to get from Viper. So we analyzed that RFI and we determined that there were a number of opportunities that would actually allow us to do that. So we've recently released an announcement for partnership proposals, or an AFPP, that's currently out on the street right now, but we are looking for industry partners to work with us and actually conduct the Viper mission on the surface. Step 1 proposals were actually due last week, and we got a number of them in. So we're actually quite pleased with the turnout from step 1s. We're reviewing those, and then we will invite the longer step 2 proposals in from the community after we conduct that initial assessment of their responses. Also, Lunar Trailblazer. I'm sure many of you are aware of what's going on with Lunar Trailblazer. It was launched, co-manifested on the Intuitive Machines 2 launch, Falcon 9, back on the 26th of February. And early on the 27th, we unfortunately discovered there were some power anomalies, and then we lost signal with Lunar Trailblazer. We were able to reconnect with Trailblazer for a short period of time, but then we lost signal with it again. Since then, we've been using Doppler radar from Goldstone as well as other locations to get a track on it, and it's still on its same trajectory as it was from its TLI separation from the rocket. However, it's also in a slow tumbling mode. So we believe that the solar panels aren't receiving enough power for it to turn on, allow us to communicate with it. We are working diligently around the clock to hope that if Trailblazer gets into a favorable condition where the solar panels are collecting enough power, we can grab back a hold of it, and we'll make assessments on what to do with Trailblazer at that time. But our JPL team is, again, working extremely hard to recover Trailblazer, and if anyone can do it, I would dare say that the JPL team can. So if you've got some good karma out there, please send that karma out to that team. I'll leave it there. Next bit of news, again on the roller coaster, IM2, Intuitive Machines 2 update. IM2 was one of the second delivery from Intuitive Machines to the lunar surface with a number of Space Technology Mission Directorate payloads, primarily Prime 1 payloads, which was the M-Solo mass spectrometer and the Trident drill. There were a number of other payloads on board that were a result of STMD tipping points, including a hopper and a 3GPP COM demonstration on the surface. I will say that the unfortunate thing is that Intuitive Machines lander tipped over on its side upon landing. And while it was still operational on the surface, it did fall into a crater. And because it was in a crater, the solar panels weren't able to be illuminated, and it eventually ran out of batteries, and end of mission was called later on that evening. I will say that we were able to exercise the NASA payloads that we funded out of NASA, and we also got some really great images from from Athena, which is the name of the lander. On the right-hand side, you see two selfies while it's in orbit around the moon. Interestingly, in the top right, it actually is imaging the place where it would eventually settle down in Mons Bhutan. And on the left, you see Addie taking a selfie with Earth in the background, and as you can see it laying on its side in the crater. I will say that if there are significant questions about this, there is on Wednesday, IM2 mission summary that's being given by Dr. Ben Bussey and Dr. Tim Crane, and that's at 1 to 3 p.m. in the Woodlands meeting room here at LPSC. So if you have a lot of questions about IM2 and the mission itself, please make sure you reach out to them and or come to that summary. Okay, good news. I swear I have good news. Firefly Blue Ghost Mission 1 update. We have had a nominal landing. It was fabulous. I don't know how many of you have seen the videos that have come out of that landing, but it's truly spectacular seeing the plume surface interaction with the rocket exhaust and seeing the dust fly over and rocks flying all over, people naming those rocks they're flying over. And it's absolutely inspirational seeing that. You can actually see a video here of the Lister payload, which is a pneumatic drill doing heat flow measurements into the surface of the moon, and you see it blowing the dust, blowing the fines, blowing the pebbles out of the hole it's drilling, so that it can take temperature measurements as it gets down. So this is one example of the success that we've had with Firefly. Blue Ghost Mission 1. We have 10 NASA payloads on Firefly, and I will say that 6 of them have already completed their mission success criteria, and 3, I believe, have actually already completed stretch goals for their science. So I will say at this time, Blue Ghost is still operational on the surface. They are coming out of local lunar noon, which is high temperatures. And so they've been phasing their operations in and out to stay nice and cool during lunar noon. And as they start heading towards lunar night, then we expect to complete all the operations of the other payloads. So overall, it's been a fabulous, wonderful proof positive that the CLIPS model does work, and we're quite excited there. A little shout out to Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, who continues to do wonderful stuff for science and for exploration. But there you can see an image of Blue Ghost Mission 1 sitting there on the surface next to that crater, which is about 15 meters in diameter, I believe. So fabulous. Lelro and LROC continue to do wonderful work for us. And lastly, I just want to leave you with a note. Well, also leave you with a wonderful picture from Blue Ghost, but also leave you with a note that we have a number of other CLIPS deliveries still in work over the next 2 years. So we have Blue Origin has a Scalps payload on board, which is a series of cameras designed to look at plume surface interaction. That's going to be on their Mark 1 serial number 1 lander. Astrobotic Griffin Mission 1 is expected to go in late 2025. Intuitive Machines and IM3 expected to go in early 26, and that will be carrying the first of our PRISM payloads, the Lunar Vertex. And then Firefly has 2 in mid-26. They're going concurrently. One is an orbiter, one is a lander. The orbiter has the lander is carrying the Lucy Night payload, which is a cosmological payload. It's in partnership with the Department of Energy, and will be peering back into the dark ages using the far side radio quiet of the moon in order to make those measurements. And then the orbiter actually has a calibration source on it, which not only will help us baseline our data, but also will be acting as a comm relay to get the data back from the far side. And then Draper will launch FSS, Farside Seismic Week, and Litmus, which is a combination of magnetotelluric study and the Lister instrument that you just saw operating. And that will also be going to the far side in the Schrodinger Basin in Q4 of 2026. So a lot of wonderful things happening. Stay with us, stay tuned. It's an exciting time to be a lunar scientist.
Thanks. All right, I'm told that we can go back to Jake, so we're going to try this. Let me back up to his slides first. Jake, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So let me get back to your slides, and there's no echo or
Yes.
repeat yet. So
Well, that's great. I've got an array of phones here just in case it goes bad again, so everybody can alert me. Thank you, everyone. Appreciated the heads up. So thanks. Glad to be able to talk to you. I wanted to thank SMD for the opportunity to talk, and the LPI staff for making this happen. I apologize that I'm not present. I'm really, really sorry not to be there in person. It's beyond me. I'm just not able to be there. So I do, however, want to update you on what's happening in Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. And we will work very closely with Brad and SEO and Joel and everything that they were just talking about. So wonderful to see us touching down on the lunar surface. Whether we get it right or close to right, it's always good to see something down there on the lunar surface. We'll go to the next slide, please. Just have a few slides. I wanted to just note for those that maybe are not familiar with it, Exploration Systems has been working through our strategy and architecture office to develop a yearly process that we call the architecture. This is basically our architecture evaluation process. So we go through a yearly analysis cycle in which we basically conduct the research, the analyses on different scenarios, different trades, to try and make the best informed decisions that we can make. The intent is for this to be a very transparent process. We hold workshops each year with both our industry and academic partners here in the United States, as well as with our international partners. The very short version of this is that we start with the objectives, the Moon to Mars objectives, which includes objectives from all of our directorates. And we take those and we've broken those down through a process we call decomposition to break them down to basically the functions, the smallest steps that we would need to address in order to begin to address those objectives. So we have that process all explained in something called the architecture definition document. If you use the QR code at the bottom of the screen, you can get there. And this documentation is rather lengthy. We have a full document that's over 200 pages now, but we also have an executive summary to support it. And we are now finally getting into the groove on this process. So each year, we're assessing new concepts, new ideas that we could add to the architecture to increase our ability to explore the moon going forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next slide just highlights what our products were this year. So I mentioned the ADD itself, which is the main document, but we also have the executive overview, much shorter version. So if you want to just kind of start with the easier reading, that's probably the great starting point. But the data are all included in the architecture definition document. So you can go there and look everything up. We also have a series of white papers. And in fact, in this last cycle, we released 12 new white papers. So those white papers are shorter, maybe on the order of about 5 pages to discuss specific topics. So an example of papers this year, lunar mobility drivers and needs. We had a discussion about lunar surface cargo. So the types of questions that we often get, we give a good short example or explanation about them. We also added 2 new elements this year. We added an initial surface habitat and a lunar surface cargo lander to the architecture. So these are critical elements for us to begin enabling longer stays on the surface, longer stays by our crew, and getting them the supplies that they need in order to do that exploration. So these are critical next steps. And again, through that yearly analysis cycle, we're able to understand what are the right next steps to take. We also released an Appendix C this year, which is called our technology gaps. This is something our industry partners and many of you in academia have been asking for, is an explanation of the gaps we have so that we can make sure we're investing in the right technology to enable our architecture to go forward. We also released a lunar logistics mobility study call this year. A number of teams were awarded awards to help us study those concepts. So this is an opportunity for both industry and academia to participate. And then we made our first Mars decision this year. It's about the power system, and that's documented in the ADD. And the decision was to go forward with the expectation of Mars nuclear fission power. So we just want to, give a quick highlight about that. Please read that document or look into it if you have any questions about it. Next slide, please. Just briefly, I want to talk about our current status. You just heard from Brad about the exciting CLIPS landings, the data that we're collecting. Our next big mission is Artemis 2. We're expecting to fly that no later than April of 2026. So we're getting close to about a year now, and we're working as hard as we can to move that time to the left and get it launched as early as we can. That would be then followed by Artemis 3. We're aiming right now for mid-2027 on that. Artemis 2 in many ways will be similar to Artemis 1, but we will have crew members on board. So this will be a full test run of the ECLIS system, the environmental control system, and life support with our astronauts on board. We are flying some science on there. We'll be studying how life responds to the deep space environment. But being a planetary science conference, I will note that this will be the first opportunity for human eyes to look at the far side of the moon in over 50 years. So we're looking forward to that. I know our friends in SMD are working to train up the astronauts to have conversations with them about what they're seeing when they look out that window. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. Just wanted to highlight, in case you are unaware, these are those sets of eyes that are going to be looking at the moon on the far side for the first time in many of our lives in over 50 years. So we've got Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, who is flying there for CSA as a partnership for us. So we're really getting excited here. We had a suppliers conference with our Artemis industrial suppliers just last week. Both Jeremy and Christina were there, and just hearing them talking about like how, we're getting close to this, right? And I think Christina said in the sense of space flight, this is basically tomorrow. It's like tomorrow that we're going. So on the time scale of space exploration, these folks are really about ready to go. So within the next year or so, hopefully we'll have some eyes looking at the far side of the moon. That's my last slide. Happy to answer questions at the end when we have the opportunity. So thank you all.
All right, so I just have a couple of closing slides that I want to get to. I'll flip through Brad's charts. Those gorgeous pictures from Firefly again. Just love the video. Just gonna watch it for a second. Oh, love that. Okay. All right. So, one of the things we've talked about the dynamic, challenging time that we have at the moment. And one of the things that I want to remind the community of, and remind all of us of, because we have a bunch of early career folks here as well, is that this is a moment in time. The NASA as an agency, NASA science has experienced challenges in the past. We will get through this. So we really want to encourage people to stay focused on the science that you do. That's what's really going to carry the day. When you communicate to us the science you do, and then we communicate to our stakeholders and the world what we do, people love NASA. They love NASA science. And so it's really imperative that you keep looking up despite the challenges that we're facing, and that you celebrate the discoveries that you're making so that we can all share in that. It's really important. And it's very difficult. And I understand that at this point in time, especially early career folks making decisions about career paths and things like that. And so there are a lot of conversations to be had around those. But I want to assure those of you on the early career side that there have been difficult times in the past and we've gotten through them. So with that, I'm going to move on to other good things in NASA science. So coming up this year for us in planetary science, we have the Donald Johanson flyby that Lucy's going to do on April 20th. For those of you who were around before, we did the Dinkinesh encounter. We learned some very surprising and very interesting things. I don't know if that's going to happen here, but stay tuned. Lucy's going to fly by there. That's its last stop before it heads out to the Trojan asteroids. Brad already talked about the CLPS landings and launches that are going to happen later this year, so keep an eye out for those. And Psyche, let's not forget Psyche. Psyche's still on its way out to the asteroid Psyche, and so it's going to be arriving in 2029. I also, in generally, in terms of NASA science, keep an eye out for the Sphere-X Punch launch. Those are our colleagues in astrophysics and in heliophysics. They're working to get those two missions, which are sharing a ride off the ground. They've had some delays out in California, so fingers crossed that they launch soon. But I did want to mention that because NASA science really spans a wide range of disciplines, from astrophysics teaching us about the universe to heliophysics teaching us about the sun, planetary science teaching us about the solar system, and earth science teaching us about our home planet. So they're all interconnected. Share with your colleagues in other fields. It's really important to build those relationships as well. All right, I'm going to leave this up here while we do questions. So I'm not going to go through this list, but these are the NASA activities at LPSC this year. So take a screenshot of it and you won't miss anything. But I do want to just say thank you for your time today. I also want to wish you a really good and productive LPSC. We're here for conversation throughout the meeting, and I think we're going to turn it over now for questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Walter and Justin for some comments first.
Charles and team, thank you very much for an informative presentation. Folks in the audience and online, this is your time to ask your questions. So here's how we're going to do it. We've got over there, here in the middle, and over here. We're going to rotate. We'll start here in the middle and we'll rotate around, but we also have online questions. And we're just going to come up. Let me remind you, please take a civil tone. Start with your name and affiliation, and we will work through as many as we can until at some point you will be standing in the way of everybody getting dinner. And please understand when we hit that point. So.
Okay, I guess I'm first. Hi, I'm Katie Gansler. I'm from the University of Maryland. What a lot of people don't know about me is I have a degree in political science in addition to being a grad student in geology. And the executive branch does not have the power of the purse. Only Congress does. And I understand with a government shutdown, we're going to ignore government shutdown situation. But also from my understanding is that a civil servant and political appointees are required to give an oath to the American people and not to the executive branch. So how are you, and by you I mean NASA leadership in general, ensuring that congressionally mandated funds that are passed through budgets and continuing resolutions are making it to researchers who have proposals that have been already awarded, and thus that money has already been governmentally directed to that research? How are we ensuring that that stays intact?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. It is a question that has come up within NASA. And so I will say that I think a famous quote was from around John Marshall as the Supreme Court Chief Justice about as far as the role of the judiciary in this process and the rulings of the Supreme Court.
It's John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him
Yes,
enforce it. And it was
yes.
regarding the Trail of Tears.
Yes, no, exactly. And so I think in a similar way, the Congress can pass and appropriate the money. That is their job, their constitutional responsibility. They're not doing a very good job of that. And so so it is the executive's responsibility to ensure enforcement of that, to ensure that that happens. We do have executive orders that have directed us to do certain things with respect to certain grants. We are in constant conversation with our general counsel with regard to the directives that we're receiving. You know that some of them have already been litigated in court and there are injunctions on some of them. So it is, we are doing our best to keep up with all of those, recognizing the responsibility that we had for the stewardship of the taxpayer dollars. We cannot individually ensure that Congress's money flows to everybody that it's supposed to. We can raise the concern and say this does not seem to be aligned with that. But ultimately, we have to follow the implementation that we're directed to do based on the current status of an executive order as mitigated by any injunction from a court. So we're not lawyers. We don't have degrees in political science. So we are in constant consultation with those folks to help us stay, on the right path, going, throughout this entire process.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Amanda Hendricks, Planetary Science Institute. Let's see. So we're hearing bad rumors about the president's budget requests for FY26. I think I heard you say that you're waiting for a pass back.
Mhm.
Um,
That's true.
but I don't know if you all are going to be able to do much with that.
Well, I
Since
won't
we
know
don't
until I
have the
see
next year.
it. So I have
Yeah.
not seen it.
But at some point, hopefully, you'll want some input from the community in terms of prioritizing what you're going to do with that budget. And this community has really valued the input from the analysis and assessment groups.
Mhm.
And so when are we going to be able to get those back online again?
Okay, I'm going to turn that one over to Kurt. He's been working this with Kathleen.
We're looking to get the assessment groups up and running again as soon as we possibly can. We had a meeting with the chairs last week, I believe it was. We gave them some things to think about and asked them to go consult with the rest of their steering committees. And we're hearing back from them. And the things we asked them to think about is, what are you going to discuss in the meetings, and help them realize that what Charles just said, that civil servants have to comply with executive orders, and that has to be taken into account. I expect that in the next couple weeks, we should get this cleared up, and hopefully we'll be able to get the assessment groups back scheduling their meetings, and we'll be able to get them up and running. I can tell you all that there is great support in SMD to get the assessment groups, not just for planetary science, but for our other science divisions, back meeting again as soon as we can, because we recognize the value of the discourse that you're referring to. And the assessment groups are one of our direct ways of engaging regularly with the community, because meeting once a year at LPSC at NASA Night is great, but it's an insufficient discourse. So yeah, we are very committed to restarting that discourse as soon as we can properly do so. And we're still figuring out all the details on that. And you're going to hear that answer a lot tonight. But again, we need to work together to find a path forward in the new environment that we find ourselves in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the next question is from online. Do we have any clarity on the extent to which private institutions receiving NASA support are expected to follow the recent executive orders?
Executive orders apply to the federal government directly. I know that there have been communications to private institutions regarding specific things. There are gray areas where NASA funded things exist in universities, for example. And so that has been a challenge to work out sort of what responsibilities those elements have with regard to following executive orders. If they're funded by NASA and they're managed by NASA but at another institution, then we've tilted toward the balance that they should comply. No institution should feel obligated to comply with an executive order that does not apply to them. So I want to be clear that some institutions, and I've seen this, are anticipating that they should comply in order to do business with the federal government. And that's not under our direct control. Institutions make their own decisions about how far out they want to be, on the limb in terms of attracting attention from the federal government. So there are sometimes decisions being made by institutions that are not directed by us. And so I want to make that clear. There are, as I said, sort of edge cases where we have talked to institutions about certain elements that they have that are NASA funded that we have to make sure comply with these executive orders.
Yeah, let's go back to the room. So
Live.
Thank you. Clive. Wow, I've been muted. Can you hear me? All right, Clive Neal, University of Notre Dame. Question about Viper, Brad. I was really gladdened to see that the AFPP
rolls off the tongue.
And many other places. The question, I mean, I'm really glad to see that this is rolling along and there's interest from commercial partners to do this. The thing that is niggling me is we've got a very science and engineering team with Viper that is in limbo and is being degraded. And if we don't maintain the integrity of those teams, the operation of that mission is going to be put in jeopardy. So how are you ensuring that at least a core team is being maintained so that we can maximize the investment that both the taxpayer and the commercial companies are making in getting that mission to the moon?
So that's, of course, a great question, as always, Clive. One of the things that we did within the AFPP is ask the proposers to determine how they were going to conduct the science as completed by Viper once on surface. It is entirely up to those commercial entities to determine whether they are going to engage and employ some sort of reimbursable Space Act agreement with NASA to keep the science team around and the operations team around to conduct the mission. It's possible that some of them may want those teams to train the industry partners in order to conduct the mission. One of the things that we've of course said is we are maintaining our open science policies, and every science, all the science that comes back from Viper will be disseminated out within 6 months of receipt on ground as per the norm. But your question is how are we maintaining the integrity of the team overall? I will say that with the timeline that you saw, we are pushing very hard to get that timeline and a decision on what to do with Viper through as soon as possible before the Viper team exhausts its FY25 funds.
Okay, so we need to look at FY26 just in case. No, don't answer that. I'm just, that's.
Yeah.
Don't answer that. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, left side of the room, please.
Mark Sykes, Planetary Science Institute. I had a question, but I wanted to make a comment on a previous question regarding flow down of executive orders. And as an institute, a private institute that does get grants from NASA and contracts, such orders have been flowed down towards us, cease and desist orders for engaging in certain kinds of activities inconsistent with the administration policies, et cetera. And plus we also receive from we're subawards to prime awards at other private institutions, and they flow down these demands to us as well for the work that we do on these grants contracts. I kind of take the position that these orders are sufficiently ambiguous in terms of understanding what these things mean, that it's really not possible to respond positively. And when other institutions have flowed these orders down to us, I've asked them if they would please consider that they may interpret the language in these orders different than I interpret the language in these orders, but we will certainly defer to them as the prime institution. And so please take a look at our statement of work, take a look at, perhaps talk to the PI, look at the proposal and go through it, and then come back to us with the specific activities that they feel fall within these things that should be excluded. I haven't heard back from anyone yet.
Okay.
My question, and I encourage other people to be questioning of these things, you know, instead of running around like chickens with your heads cut off, trying to figure out what do they mean? What do they mean? And impose some definition on that, you know, then everybody is coming up with different stuff. And actually, my question was along those lines. And that is, you guys are given an impossible task in the February 26th executive order to look at your thousands of grants and contracts and determine, you know, the compliance with these rules, and also wade, frost, and abuse. And you've got a fixed time to do that. And again, all this stuff is even terms like DEIA. Well, you know, what you interpret that as encompassing may be different than what I interpret that as encompassing. And so, but you've got to do the work that you've been tasked to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are you, so at some point you need to make a decision as to what this stuff means and how it's going to be applied to all these things. Are you documenting what all these things mean, or either the direction you're given or your interpretation of the directions, and then how you're applying them to these.
Mark, is there a question in there, please?
Yeah, I'm asking, are you documenting your interpretation of these things so that when grants get cut, because they're asking you to terminate grants, that we understand the detailed basis other than this vague compliance with a list of executive orders, which is difficult to interpret. So I want to understand what your process is for documenting how these decisions are going to be made.
So I'm going to turn that over to Kathleen, who has been really leading us through this and helping clarify the interpretation as you're suggesting.
So we get guidance from a series of folks. We do not interpret any executive orders as we are not lawyers. So we receive guidance of what the interpretation is from our legal team. For all of our grants and cooperative agreements, those are managed out of the NSSC, and they have the ultimate authority to make decisions about what the funds are done with and if the awards are terminated or modified. And those are conversations with our technical officers who oversee the science, noting that all of our program officers, all of our technical officers want to see this great science done. It was selected. So it is a continuous conversation right now. And we are getting continuous guidance from our team, and we're working to implement it as we're able.
All right, we're gonna go online. It's actually a couple of questions. I'm gonna roll them together. There's appreciation online for recognition that this is a scary time, especially for many early career researchers. But there's been a few questions of what is NASA headquarters and leadership doing to make sure we don't lose a generation of scientists as we move forward through this time?
I mean, that is a very challenging question. Given the fact that we're 6 weeks into this, I won't say that we've identified or adopted a complete strategy around that. We're aware of the issue, we're aware of the challenge, and it's easy for me to have stood up here and said, hey, just wait it out. It's only a few years, you guys are young, and that's not a solution and it's not a strategy. And I'm not going to say that it is, but that's what I have at the moment. I'm going to open it up to my team if they want to talk a bit all about sort of ideas, because most of these folks are planetary scientists. And so they can tell you a little bit about what it was like to be an early career person. And some people have been around long enough, like Kurt, to be able to comment about the ups and downs of a career in planetary science. So I want to give them a chance to speak directly to those folks.
I will just note, we do have programs in Roses 24, and we're anticipating programs in Roses 25 that are geared specifically to early career folks. So we have our finance program. We also have PSIE, which is precursor science investigations for Europa. We also have our early career award, which is specifically targeted towards early career folks that have received additional Roses awards. And programs like our Lunar mapping program is looking for senior graduate students as well. So there are a lot of opportunities in our research programs for early career involvement.
I would add to that, since I'm old. You set a good example by standing up. For all you early career researchers, take a breath. Take a breath, a deep breath, and remember why you're on this career path. It's not going to be smooth, no matter what, just like with every career path. But as Kathleen just mentioned, we haven't changed the opportunities that are out there for the most part. We'll see what the future holds. We're not sure what it holds, but there are a lot of opportunities out there for you to take advantage of. Empower yourself and learn what they are and make use of them. It's a bumpy road right now. This won't be the only time in your career that there's a bumpy road. But just remember why you're here. And we still have opportunities that you can take advantage of to advance in your career. We recognize very much that we have to have a steady stream of opportunities available for you from the undergraduate through the end of your career. And we've been putting those in place for years now. And we intend to keep those in place because we understand that it needs to be a continuous stepward process throughout your career. I think we're doing a lot better job with that today than when I started at headquarters in 2003.
Thanks.
Thanks. We're going to do one more online, and I'm going to read it word for word without interpretation as best I can. Can someone comment on the first phase of the reduction in force that happened this morning, including closing of the Office of Chief Scientist and potential further RIF activity to come?
So we're aware of this. Obviously, there was an email. We received it. I will say that our entire team has been prepping for this event tonight. We have not paid a lot of attention to that. So I don't have any more details than have already been out in the public. We know that this happened. We know many of these people personally. I know that this did not, there was no notice of this that happened this morning. So I can't offer any more insight than you all have from what you've read in the press based on the email that we received. So that's all I can say for now.
Okay, no.
All right, Noam Eisenberg, Applied Physics Laboratory. This is kind of a part two of the ag question. Speaking for one of the ags and potentially for the ags in general, we believe, like we had this meeting with Kurt and Kathleen last week, and we believe we've answered the mail for what the ags needed to do in order to respond to the EOs with their terms of reference and everything like that. We think that we have done all that was asked of us. I'm not at this point 100% sure that that is true. If it isn't, I want to make sure that if there's anything outstanding that you're waiting on for us, I want to make sure we get it to you as soon as possible. And if there isn't anything that you're waiting on, is there anything that we, the ags, the communities can do to speed things up as much as possible? As you say, the ags, they're one of the ways we get to tell everybody our science, right? So we are extremely eager to get back to doing that. And the second half of this has to do with not the other sort of counterpart of the ags, which is the advisory council, which again, Kurt and Kathleen talked to us a little bit about that last week, and we're disseminating that to our people, but this is a better venue to get that information out. The Planetary Advisory Council is a different beast and is going to be reactivated in a different way. And if you could help everybody else understand the whys and wherefores of that would also be helpful.
Sure. The advisory, I'm going to ask Kurt to respond in a minute, but the advisory committees fall under FACA, which is a law regarding federal advisory committees. You know that, and the audience may not know that. And so that process is different. As you said, starting it back up. We're waiting for further direction from the incoming leadership of the agency. So that process is still on pause. With regard to the ags, I'm going to let Kurt talk about the current status of where we are in that process.
No, should we all just like scoot up our chairs? To my knowledge, we're not waiting on anything else from the ags. There might be one or two that I haven't emailed Kathleen back yet. At this point, I think it really, and the ag chairs and steering committees have been enormously helpful and cooperative. So thanks to all of you. I think really the big thing now is we need to make sure that everybody at headquarters is comfortable. Because we want to make sure that the next step we take of restarting the meetings and restarting the discourse is not going to surprise anybody. So that's on us. And it's near the top of the list. It's just unfortunate that right now there's just so much at the top of the list. So I promise you we're working hard to get to it. We just got a lot to work through right now.
Okay, we'll go to the left side of the room, please.
Hi, Cass Nicely, University of Alaska Fairbanks. First off, I want to thank y'all for bringing clarity about how executive orders affect y'all. I really appreciate that. To get into my question, our seemingly white supremacist presidential administration is looking at slashing the NASA SMD budget by as much as 50%. Now, from what I understand, it's illegal for y'all to tell us to reach out to our representatives in Congress and the Senate, who, by the way, don't track the number of times an individual calls. They track the total number of people that call about a subject. So what can we do as the planetary science community to ensure that NASA gets the funding it needs so that y'all can do the incredibly important and critical work that y'all do and, not get fired?
Well, thank you for the latter concern. So you may not know, but there is an act called the Hatch Act, which precludes civil servants from lobbying. We cannot actively engage in lobbying. We cannot encourage people to lobby, and we won't. So one thing I'll say is, first and foremost, is continue to do your science and continue to communicate your science. At your institutions, work with communications teams to improve the communications of your science, because believe it or not, Nikki Fox goes every day to the 9th floor with a highlight from SMD. She has one division a day. She has 5 science divisions and takes a highlight each day up there right now to advertise what the amazing things that SMD does. We have Mondays. So we prepare one on Friday and we send one up, and then she talks about it with the folks who are currently up there on Fridays. So first and foremost, do your science, keep doing it and keep telling us about it. It's really critical and it really helps, right? The things you do engage human imagination, and there's nothing greater than luring people in to the things that we do. With regard to the second part, all I will say is that every person in this room lives in everybody who lives here lives in a representative democracy. And there are levers at your disposal, at each of our disposals, that individually we can choose to communicate the things that are important to us. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thanks. We had a question. Coming online that's timely since we're sitting at LPSC. Do we have any updates about the future of LPSC in 2026?
Okay. So I don't know how many people know that there was a evolving understanding of the vehicle that we use for LPSC, which is a cooperative agreement, and an opinion that that was not the appropriate vehicle for running a conference. So we had to work with OGC essentially to develop a new process, and we're in the process now of developing essentially a competitive solicitation for a new approach to LPSC. So that's in work, and we're trying very hard to get it in place so that we can have LPSC next year. We are committed to a conference for the planetary science community on an annual basis. And so I expect that to move forward. Things will change a little bit, but just know that we in PSD are committed to doing that. We just have to work through some of the procurement and legal aspects of sort of how we go about securing essentially an organization that will help us organize this in the future.
Okay, left side, please.
Hi, Shannon Hibbard, Desert Research Institute. So NSF put out a list of flagged words within proposals. Does NASA have anything like that for us when we're writing our proposals?
Not to my knowledge,
We do.
Kathleen.
We do not.
No.
Do you know if there will be a list of flagged words we should look out for?
We do not anticipate putting out any list of words. There will, Roses 25, we're working to ensure compliance with executive orders before we release it. I would make sure that you read the language in Roses very carefully prior to putting in a proposal.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Just last month, there were a lot of news reports coming out about NASA. Is NASA asking their employees to take down LGBTQIA+ things?
So I'll say this. So I am a member of the LGBTQ+ community. I have always felt very welcomed in my various roles at NASA. I've been a contractor, a civil servant, and now a senior executive, and I have felt very welcomed at every stage of my career there. That said, I know that the executive orders have made some people feel that they could not express themselves openly at work through the display of pride flags, for example. I have had internal private conversations with folks about their concerns about those things, those items. And part of what I tried to convey was, even in the absence of those displays, the sentiment behind them, the support that the people in SMD give to the LGBTQ+ community is still there. And to remind people that those people haven't changed how they feel, but so that doesn't completely mitigate the fact that those displays may not be there anymore because people decided maybe I shouldn't put these out. However, it is my sincere hope that NASA continues to be a welcoming place and a respectful place, because we attract the best talent from across the nation. On behalf of the science community and the world, NASA is a leader in many respects. And so we want to continue to be that place, even if that particular expression may not be as present as it once was. It's difficult. It's difficult. And I'll acknowledge also that, the LGBTQ+ community is one part of the entire community of people affected by the recent executive orders. It is not the only one. And so I'm extremely mindful of that as well. And so, we have conversations around the need to be respectful and welcoming in the workplace for all people. And that's what we'll continue to do.
Thank you.
I don't have a question. I have 3 comments. First, I think most of us in the room recognize just how hard a job you have right now, where you want to continue engendering the stuff that makes us want to do what we do in this career without you guys getting fired. So I appreciate that. And I think it's very, very hard. So thank you for doing that. And I don't envy you. The second comment is this: the vast majority of us in this room are not civil servants. So if you don't already have one, there are lots of ways you can express your support for the most vulnerable people in our community. I encourage you to do it. Not just here, but anywhere you are, so we can live what you guys are trying to emulate too. The third thing is that we had a question from Kaz a little bit earlier about what can we do? You can't tell us, you can simply tell us we have these levers available to us. We can advocate. Call your reps. If you live in the United States, even if you're not a citizen, you can call your representatives and your state senators. And more to the point, the Planetary Society is running these advocacy how-to workshops. There was one today, there's one tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday, 2 to 3 p.m. in Grogan's Mill. Go there and learn how to effectively advocate as a private citizen for what we want to do. And relatedly, at 1 p.m. on Wednesday in Grogan's Mill, we're going to have an open discussion about the merits of establishing a new professional planetary society as another vehicle to advocate for our priorities in the planetary science realm in the US and abroad. So I want to put that on your radar. Again, thank you very much.
Go ahead.
That was pretty intense. Trevor Austin, Arizona State University. My question's about the online presentation, but any of you could answer. I noticed in big, bold letters, we said that the safety of the Artemis 2 astronauts is the #1 priority. I'm not an expert on the engineering, but from my understanding, the SLS rocket is propelled by hundreds of millions of tons of explosives material. So riding on top of that seems to be pretty inherently unsafe. In all seriousness, we're not sending astronauts to space to be safe. Do you think that being dishonest with ourselves about our priorities might create an environment where we are more lax with our safety standards? Thank you.
So I don't know if Jake is still with us. Is he online?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yep.
Oh, is that?
Can you
Okay,
hear me?
did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. Yes, I
Okay,
heard it.
I'll let you handle this.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, you are correct. I mean, space flight, I would say the term exploration, whether it's in space, here on Earth, anywhere, is not inherently safe. But we are explorers and we will continue to explore. The SLS rocket is the rocket that can carry our astronauts into space. We have tested it. We've flown it without astronauts. We have assessed any issues that we've had to deal with. There's a reason we scrubbed multiple flights during Artemis 1, even when we didn't have astronauts on board, to assess and learn and understand how to fly that rocket. It's designed as well with at the top with an ability to pull the crew capsule away, the Orion, should there be some problem with the SLS. So, you know, I don't believe that we are being dishonest with ourselves. We didn't say that we can assure 100% perfection and that they are in no harm. They'll be the first ones to acknowledge to you that they recognize the risk that they're signed up for. We're not saying there's zero risk in flying our astronauts into space. What we are saying is that our top priority is to do it as safely as we possibly can. Every single one of us in every directorate that is involved in this activity focuses on that. I don't know if you've heard me speak personally in the past, but they are our astronauts, but I refer to them as our friends. They're our family. We take this very seriously. We don't put them on board until we know that we have minimized that risk as far as we possibly can. Is there still risk? Absolutely. It is inherently there. It's inherently present during all exploration, but we know and understand that, and we design our systems to minimize it as much as we can. So again, I don't think that we are being dishonest with ourselves when we say that that's our top priority.
Thank you, Jake.
Okay, given the time, this will be the last question.
Okay. Hi, Alex Goronska, Catholic University of America and NASA Goddard. So I understand the really difficult situation we find ourselves in on top of an already difficult funding situation we've been in. However, we also cannot do the science without the proper support. And so I want to ask you all if you could talk a little bit more about how you are advocating for the planetary science community right now to get around that.
So I mean, this is a daily conversation, right? Within SMD, we advocate for planetary science on a daily basis. We provide Nikki information that she needs to advocate for us as well. But it is going to be, as it has always been, and a process of figuring out how to maximize the science that we can get for the priorities that we have within the resources that we're given. When those resources are further constrained, we have to make difficult decisions. We have a decadal survey, fortunately, that also helps us understand what the priorities of the communities are, of the community is. And so we also hopefully will have AGs at that point in time, and we will also engage the community to share sort of this process of fitting within the resource curve that we're given. So it is an ongoing exercise. It's a normal one. We do it every year, right? But it doesn't seem quite so dramatic because the changes are not so big, and I don't know what they're going to be this year. You know, I know people have thrown out the article or the story about the 50% reduction for SMD. That is complete speculation, and it has been brought up a number of times that has been made it very difficult to have any other conversation because people have accepted it as the truth. And I have no indication that that is the truth. I'm not saying it won't be, but I don't have that information. So I'm not going to spend time planning to that scenario when the likelihood of that is unknown to me. So really, just know that our primary objective is to maximize and preserve the amount of science that we can get, given whatever constraints we're given. And so we will continue to do that. And that means advocating for the various elements of planetary science, but there will be difficult choices to make among those different elements.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Thanks. We told you we would go until we need to get people to dinner. I'm sorry. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Charles, and your team for a very transparent discussion. I'm genuinely appreciative of everything you've said to us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.